Good morning. My name is Michael, and I'm broadcasting from my garage located in St. Michael's Parish in the Pine Tree State's most powerful and divided city, Augusta, the political center of Maine. Every day, I begin by imploring the assistance of God's archangel of war, St. Michael. Please pray with me if you can. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. St. Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and the other evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I had a really good time yesterday morning. Just looking at my StreamYard panel here to see if anything's happening. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if I should trust that little number up there that says 0 people are watching. So I'm streaming on 3 platforms. One is michaelheath.tv. I know that one doesn't show up in the numbers through StreamYard. So now it says that 2 people are watching. I'm going to assume that those people are on X. Well, one of them is Shane Mitchell. He is very faithful to come in and wish me a good morning. Thank you very much for that sentiment. You know, things have become so toxic online. I'm sorry, Shane. You're going to have to forgive me. But my first question, if I haven't met a person in real life, is this a robot? It's probably a robot. I'm sure it's a robot. You know, it's an AI-driven robot that's saying good morning to me. And I wonder if I should, and we're going to be talking about this morning on the show. I wonder if I should think of interact with this person like I'm interacting with a human being. Isn't it awful to have to live that way and have to think that way? But so Shane says, no, sir. So I assume what he means by that is that he's not a robot. But then, see, I've never met Shane in real life. So what would a robot driven by Musk's AI who wants to gain my trust, what would a robot say? Well, that's what he'd say right there. He'd say, of course I'm not a robot. And then the next thing an AI would say is, I'm a real boy, right? I'm not trying to toy with you, Shane, assuming you're real. But I do think that there's a point to be made here and something for you to think about today, especially if you're using artificial intelligence like ChatGPT or any of the other options out there that allow you to chat with them, and where they're really nice to you and they make you feel good about your questions and their answers and all this stuff. And there's a lot more than just this reason. There's many reasons now to prioritize real people, interactions with real people. To the extent you're called by God to be social, to develop a social life as a human being, make sure, okay, make sure you're not doing it with a chatbot, with an artificial intelligence chatbot. Just don't do that. Use the chatbot, sure, use AI to get facts, information, to learn something new, maybe to build a new piece of software using code, or to create an image, or to write a song, which my good friend Tim Bodnar does so well. All that's fine, but don't, under any circumstances, start chatting with an artificial intelligence entity or person as if you're being social, as if you're socializing with another human being. It doesn't hurt the AI's feelings any. It doesn't have feelings, but it kind of destroys your psychology. It really messes with your head, and it messes with your emotions, and it's really I mean, basically you're you're pretending that a machine is a human person, and very dangerous for any of us humans to be doing that, because we are, as humans, unlike animals, apes, whatever, we are capable of developing religion and politics. Isn't it interesting that according to American jurisprudence, the First Amendment is limited. Free speech is limited. There are some limitations that have been litigated through the centuries, through the decades. And sort of the bottom line to that litigation, what's been revealed, I suppose, or discovered as limitations is your public speech, in order to fall under the protections of the First Amendment to the Constitution. Your speech has to be political and religious. And what are the two things that you're trained from babyhood to today? What are the two things that you're trained not to talk about in public? Religion and politics. But those are the two things that you are protected in saying publicly in the United States of America, uniquely, at least with respect to constitutional principle or constitutional law, which is one of the reasons I would argue that people still are beating a path to our door, people from all over the world, is because of the unique culture, the unique American culture that has formed as a result of that First Amendment, as a result of courts and jurisprudence and laws and our rulers being limited, being constrained when it comes to us plebs, us lowlifes, us nobodies, choosing to speak our mind on politics and religion. In America, we have an absolute protection that's in the Constitution of the United States of America, and it's also in different forms embedded in the constitutions of our states, all of our states. And that is this protection for you as a private individual, as a citizen of the United States, to speak your mind about politicians. That's why politicians can't come after you for slander in the United States of America, because the jurisprudence based on the First Amendment doesn't protect them from slander if they're a public figure. It's just too hard to sort it out, right? I mean, if they're a public figure passing the laws and you have a very strong feeling about it and you put words to those feelings, as long as you're going after, I mean, I guess I would argue if you're going after them personally, maybe there's a little question there, but I think the protection even extends to that when it comes to politicians. If you name their wife or their children or whatever, if you, as long as you're not threatening to murder them or do them harm, do them violence, I'm not sure that a politician in the United States of America is protected from that, coming from that sort of public speech. As long as you're arguing, I think, I'm not a lawyer here, I'm not a judge, but if you are a lawyer or a judge, then you can correct me in the comments or send me an email. I think that you're okay as long as the point you're making is religious or political. So I just find it so funny that I was raised to think there's two things you don't talk about in polite company: religion and politics. When those are the two things that are protected under the First Amendment, and those are the two human characteristics that set us apart from the animals, because they have everything to do with reasoning, with logic, right? Religion and politics. Politics is war with words, right? War without bullets. It's conflict in its essence. It's conflict. You get into disagreements, debate, conflict with other human beings, and a civilization is going to sort of funnel that conflict, those emotions, that fighting, if you will, with words. It's gonna funnel it in a productive direction. It's going to funnel it toward a conclusion that doesn't involve shooting one another, right? It doesn't involve murder. It doesn't involve violence. It's disagreeing with words, and this is where we're so far. This is where we're so. Shane says his mind is crippled. Oh, I'm sorry. I stop by each morning for the prayers you share, and I thank you for them. Well, thanks so much, Shane. I didn't mean to. Please forgive me. I apologize. I was trying to make a point in support of your showing up, so I appreciate it, and I'm really glad that you show up for the prayers. That's wonderful. So oh, let's see behind that. We got that point out there. All right. So got your coffee this early morning. So yesterday morning, and you can go watch it on archive, I had a conversation for an hour with Paul, my good friend, very good friend, Paul Medore from Lewiston, Maine, and with Tim Bodnar, the truth slinger, who had his account, his X account, which he had built up over 2 years to 30,000 followers. He had that nuked, meaning it was suspended. And according to a reliable source, who I'm going to talk about right now, his account on X, I would argue through no fault of his own, has been permanently suspended, and that's been his way of communicating with the world through what I think he calls it Truth Stream Media or something. It's him and his wife Jen, and they have something media productions. Oh, Uncivilized Media Productions, and he's a content creator online. And his mechanism for communicating and for running his business was just taken away from him by Steve Robinson, who publishes the Mainwire, and Matt Gagnon, his boss, who's the head of some neoconservative outfit. I don't remember its name. Heritage or something. Used to be Heritage something, but I think it's got a new name now. But anyway, they work with a man who used to work for me for 6 years, many years ago, a guy named Michael Hine, and he texted me 2 evenings ago, and I wrote about his text in this blog post that I entitled Bullies and Trolls. So I want to share that with you this morning. My former employee, Michael Hine, texted me last night. He wrote, quote, "It's funny watching your .tv live stream tonight from earlier today, parentheses, yes, I'm the only one who did, close parentheses, knowing that Bodnar's account was nuked a couple of hours later. His X account ain't coming back either. Permanent suspension, I was told by Steve Robinson this afternoon. You picked the wrong horse, Mike. Stay mad, you loser. Cope harder. Cry more tears. Maybe God never liked that guy. Eh?" Close quote. So who is this guy, right? We were both employed by the Christian Civic League of Maine for 6 years before 2009. I was his boss. I learned a year ago that while he was working to ingratiate himself to Maine's socialists and communists in 2021, he publicly lied about one of my 3 sons on X. Hopefully, you recognize the psychological tactics of a bully and troll in the text he sent me last night. If not, it's beyond important that you learn more about human psychology now that artificial intelligence is deployed on the internet to diminish in your awareness the moral and human reality of your very own one-of-a-kind created sovereign soul. The battle that is raging inside you and all around you now, especially if you choose to care about politics and religion, is agenda driven by Satan. You're living on a spiritual battlefield. Satan is making effective use of sex and greed right now to weaponize the internet. He always does this with technological breakthroughs. But God, humanity's father, has always been and will always be more powerful than Satan. And God is always going someplace good and virtuous. He has the power to bring good out of evil. We've all got our trolls and bullies, especially if you're making or taking a public stand against Satan. This is because America's poem, Paradise Lost, by John Milton, informs the essence of these disunited states. He famously observed in the 15th century that it is better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Maybe you've noticed Americans have no interest in serving anybody. We would much rather rule over ourselves and everybody around us. And and so we've created hell on earth here in North America. Bullies and trolls master the devious tactics of demons. Hine and his proud money-loving pals, Robinson and Gagnon, rule in hell because they have no deep personal interest in serving in heaven. They enjoy their status here a little too much. I tasted the power and fame they enjoy, and it went to my head. Hine helped it go to my head as my assistant. Those days are behind me, and that's why I'm honored God's given me a chance to stand with a couple other maturing Christian political activist souls named Tim and Jen Bodnar. Amen. So I've written quite a bit about Hine because he came back into my life a year ago now after being absent since 2009 when I resigned and left him there. He and another gentleman named Fritz Spencer, I left them in the offices of the Christian Civic League of Maine. They were my staff. We were 3 men, Mike Hine, Fritz Spencer, and myself. And both of those men showed up in my career, my political career and ministry career, because I was the executive director of the Christian Civic League of Maine. That made me the guy who got paid every week within an institutional framework to talk about both religion and politics publicly. And during the 20 years that I led the league, the board, to its credit, decided that the priority for this tiny institution, which at that time subsisted on about $160,000 to $180,000 a year, and did all of its work for that tiny amount of money. So that these men showed up toward the end of my I was just thinking about one of my trolls who says sometimes he thinks I've got Down syndrome when he watches my when he watches my live stream. Maybe I do. I don't know. But my sense is it's just I'm starting to feel the effects at 64 years old of short-term memory, changes in my short-term memory. So when I'm my brain is thinking faster than my mouth is able to speak, and sometimes I lose my short-term thing comes into conflict with my narrative, and I end up sort of hiccuping mentally, and so it is what it is. Yeah, I know, I'm a boomer, all you millennials and Gen Xers out there. Yeah, yeah, I am, and it's only gonna get worse, and guess what? It's gonna happen to you. It goes with old age, especially for a lot of men. So, uh, Shane says that here that he, by the way, you can comment too if you're on X or YouTube, and if you do, I'll probably put it up. I stopped following Robinson and the main wire. Well, good for you. But they do make an important contribution. I'm glad they're exposing the failure of our government to enforce our laws with respect to marijuana, and their with the Chinese marijuana grow issue. They've done a lot of good work exposing that. I hope they continue. And they're also exposing a lot of the facts related to immigrants in Maine from Africa, especially Somalia right now. They seem to be very focused there. And to the extent our new citizens are doing illegal things, like it appears to be obvious this one Somalian did in gaining power within the welfare infrastructure and then diverting that money to Somalia. That all needs to be exposed, but more important than exposure, of course, is enforcement, the enforcement of existing laws. So it all needs to go way beyond just gossip and chatter, talking heads. That's all that Robinson and Gagnon are. I mean, Gagnon is the head of what's called a think tank. Nobody even wants to know what that is, right? It's a thing. They spin up a lot of reports and words that make donors happy, and then Robinson does journalism that's supposedly right of center. But just think for a minute about how much they don't talk about, what they don't expose, what they choose not to expose. And that goes for everybody in journalism and politics. It's really more, I noticed this early in my career when I was with the Christian Civic League of Maine. It's always more about what the powers that ought not be aren't talking about. And when I say the powers that ought not be, that would be the people that you vote for and names that you're familiar with through the media. Probably you've never met them, but you're familiar with their names through the media. And the issue is not what they're talking about, it's what they're not talking about and why. And that's what you need to think about, especially right now. So back to the Christian Civic League issue with Michael Hine and his little psyop that I guess maybe he's going to turn his attention to me now from Tim Bodnar, Tim and Jen Bodnar. I don't know. I don't really care. I shouldn't say I don't really care. I mean, who wants to get into legal or who wants to be dogged on the internet by lies and trolling? Nobody wants it. Nobody asks for it. I don't want it. But I'm not afraid of it in the sense, I'm not afraid of it when I think about who I serve and who I love, which is God and Christ and Maine and all of that. I mean, if all that happens to me is a little bit of trolling online, then, so what? So what? The people that get to be recognized almost universally as saints within Christianity are the martyrs, the ones who go to prison or who end up being murdered. They're the ones who we all are willing to think of as saints, because Christianity is, in its essence, is about martyrdom, because God himself was martyred. Now, God allowed it, for God to be martyred. There's a lot of unique things going on there, but Jesus Christ was killed by his own people. He was Jewish, and he was murdered by the Jews 2,000 years ago. And they've masterfully, over the last 150 years, developed a psychology and a politics, mostly through banking, the misuse of money, the misuse of economics. They've spun up a psychological operation that makes it impossible for most people to say what I just said, or to even think it. Most good people, most people who want to love their neighbor, who want to love their enemies, who take seriously gospel ideas, but those folks are the ones who are most vulnerable today in Maine to being manipulated by the Jews, to not hold them accountable for murdering their Messiah, to not even be able to think that thought, because in their own mind, and maybe they can't even admit that this is what they believe, but they do believe it because they've misinterpreted the Bible, that there's two paths to Christ. There's the one that Christ himself and John the Baptist articulated and practiced, which is water baptism. There's that way. And then there's being Jewish. And if you're Jewish, you don't have to be baptized. Jesus never said that. John the Baptist never said that. In fact, they taught and said and did the opposite. They said to the Jews, they said, you've got to get baptized if you're going to make it to heaven. So there you go. And as theologians, Christian theologians have worked that idea through the centuries with the Bible, Old and New Testament, Christianity had concluded prior to the early 19th century, the early 1800s, Christianity had concluded that Christianity is different from, it's a fulfillment of the old covenant, of Hebrew religion, of the Jews, if you will. It's a fulfillment of. It's some like to use the word replacement, and that's a tough word to use around Protestants and evangelicals because they in a knee-jerk fashion say, I'm not for replacement theology. Most of the time I find they haven't even really thought about it. They haven't done any sort of homework with respect to the church fathers and the theological work of Christianity up until the early 19th century. They don't know nothing. They don't know anything about that history. That's like 1,500 years, 1,300 years of theological work within Christianity that came to the conclusion that there is no such thing as Judeo-Christianity. There's no mashup between the Jews and Christianity. The only thing there is the need for people who identify as Jews, if they're interested in heaven, if they're interested in the heaven that's described in the Bible, Old and New Covenant, then they got to get baptized. They got to get water baptized, and they've got to become a Christian. There's no second path. There's no second way to get to heaven. And Christianity knew that, taught it, believed it, lived it from the early centuries until, like I say, the early 1800s. And it coincided with the immense power that accrued to the Jews through economics, through money, through banking, through usury, primarily through the charging interest on loans, on debt, on credit. The power that accrued to them came from their ownership of that aspect of economics, of Western economics. And so that's what we're dealing with today. And that's why we can't get out of our own way in Maine when it comes to divorce and abortion and sodomy and all the social issues, family formation, marriage. I mean, if you want to be worshipped in Maine today, then shack up sexually with another man or another woman, bring some kids into that arrangement and groom them to think that you're in a marriage and that those children are free to to do what they do, which is what? Have sex with one another. That's what sets them apart from any other relationship. They're very proud of that. But at the same time, if you bring that up, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, you're accusing me of being a pedophile." Well, I'm accusing you. I'm not accusing you of having sex with the kids that you've uh, adopted, but I am accusing you of preparing them mentally for that sort of activity when they become adults. You're doing that by definition. That's what you're doing. And those are the people in Maine that it's illegal now to hate, right? And I was the leader, one of the leaders. Uh, there were three of us who gained prominence in the 90s before Mike Hines showed up in my life, uh, long before, like 5 years before. I was the leader along with Paul Volley at the Christian Coalition and Paul Medore with the Maine Grassroots Coalition, who was on the show yesterday morning, to argue that point publicly using the referendum. So in a populist fashion, we argued that point, the three of us, in 1997, and then again in 2001, I think it was, and then again in 2005. And all three of none of those were settled with big money under the dome through behind the scenes lobbying. All three of those political conflicts were settled very much in public by referendum with votes, with people voting. And they won the last one, the third one. They had to spend a lot of money. They had to do a lot of hard work going door to door to lie to Maine people to eke out a very slim victory. Every one of those victories was super close, like 51, 52%. And so that was my history in Maine during the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s, was taking on that idea that two men or two women or three or whatever, because they would like it to be any number, whatever anybody chooses, kind of like this debate about bathrooms and gender and all that. The whole gender thing isn't just male and female. That people can identify as an infinite number of whatever's identities. They don't even have to be sexual. They can be whatever, alien. Tim Bodner made this point, proved this point in an excellent fashion at the Augusta School Board earlier this fall, when he called himself Bella Balls and dressed up, put on a dress and makeup, and did a brilliant 2 or 3 minute presentation in real life, in real time, and ended up surfacing this whole point about how nonsensical everything, illogical, unreasonable this whole thing is. It's always been right from the beginning of my political career, there hasn't been any reason or logic behind this. It's just been raw emotional politics, completely untethered from anything real, from anything true, from anything good or virtuous. It's just plain evil, satanic. And now you can't even think that. If I bring up the word gay and then I say it's satanic, you're like scrolling or turning off the screen or whatever. It's like I've committed a crime in your mind, and that's even if you're the best of Christians in Maine. You have been conditioned. You have been propagandized. You have been sold a bill of goods. You believe lies. You think lies. And until we can talk this way with one another, by the way, if you're watching and you're so-called gay or whatever, and you want to come on, as long as you're not going to troll, as long as you're not just going to be an idiot and resort to saying you're a hater and, oh, how dare you, and you anti-Semite, if you're not, as long as you're not going to get into name calling, as long as you're willing to come on and make an argument, anybody can. I would welcome that conversation on this live stream. I'm not afraid of reasoning together, but I have such a uh, uh, so stop following us. So Shane just commented, "Not me. I am not me. I am the most radical right winger in Maine." Not sure what he means there. Not me. Um, so maybe he'll clarify so I can understand his point. So back to the I guess I want to keep talking about Hein because he is proving to be a very curious phenomenon in Maine politics, especially right of center. And so I think it's not a waste of time to try to understand what motivates uh, him. And of course, having signed his paycheck for 6 years, I feel almost personal, certainly a professional, uh, not so much personal, but a professional duty to try to understand what's going on here. Because uh, none of us want censorship. Mainers don't want censorship when it comes to political and religious speech. We don't want that. And I read to you my blog article, and I have it in writing from Michael Hein that he's celebrating it. He loves it. He wants it with his whole heart. Uh, so, what's going on here? Is he part of the FBI? I said yesterday that the FBI is paying people in all of the 50 states to to perform actions that bring about political chaos. That's been surfaced there's plenty of evidence online for this. Like I was one of the Western states. There's been some litigation that proved it. So it's not just me making this up. It's not a conspiracy theory. That part of their budget is to perform duties related to subversion, political subversion, uh, under orders from the regime, from whichever political party is in power at the time. So right now, the FBI would be the tool of the Republicans, of Trump and the Republicans as a result of this last election. And what we're seeing is the right wing developing as toxic a form of a regime of censorship online as the left did under Dorsey's ownership of Twitter when the whole thing from the left got to the point where Donald Trump, the president of the United States, had his X account nuked. So that woke up a lot of people, and it tended to fuel political support from thoughtful Americans for the right, for Trump and the Republicans. But now we see an almost more toxic version of censorship taking form that is more, not less, religious. I think of the censorship that came to be practiced by Dorsey at Twitter as more ideological and less very openly, publicly religious. So this form that is now being promised by the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump and others is unapologetically religious. This censorship is being driven by the Jewish need to shut up, stop the mouth of people like Candace, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Tim Bodnar. And Tim has just started to, the only thing he's really said publicly that might suggest that he's starting to think about the Jews in a different way than he's been trained to think about them within evangelical Protestantism is he said something positive just before his account was nuked about Nick Fuentes, this 27-year-old young man from Chicago, Illinois, who has become now a very public phenomenon online. And so now Tim on X has had his account nuked, just the way that Donald Trump had his account nuked by Dorsey. And I think a lot of what was spinning up that censorship from the left wing of American public life, American politics, was rooted in this idea that that sex, pornography, is the symbol of free speech, of liberty. So if you think a bad thought of trannies or gays or anything related to that diversity agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI agenda, which is, I guess, been completely erased or destroyed almost completely at this point. But if you're on the other side of that ideological agenda, not so much religious as ideological, then you deserve to lose your voice on X, at that time on Twitter. But this is different. What we're experiencing now is different, and it's very openly, very publicly Jewish. It's very religious, unapologetically religious, and it's not going to work. MAGA and evangelical Christians, I know them well. They hate censorship, as they should. It's a principle that they find to be true and real and human. And I don't think this push from Netanyahu and the Jews in Israel is going to work. MAGA is splitting. It's already split. Trump, the Republicans are going to lose next year. They're probably going to lose everything. They're going to lose big in Maine. I don't think that the Republicans are going to gain the governorship. I think that the left is going to gain more seats in the legislature, and I think Maine is going to become a darker blue as a result of what happens in 2026, and that gives me a tremendous amount of hope, because it's going to force Mainers, for the first time in my life, to look through politics to reality and to finally figure out why there's so much divorce in their life, why there's so much insanity in their children and in their grandchildren, why the schools are so expensive and while not delivering education, why their property taxes are going up, why their electricity costs are going through the roof, why their beautiful landscapes are being covered in solar panels, and their majestic ridgelines, our majestic ridgelines, are being lined with windmills. And now we're getting ready to line our coast, or the Atlantic Ocean, with windmills. Though I guess the pushback against windmills with respect to the ocean caused them to be pushed beyond eyesight with respect to the coastline of Maine, I believe. And the reason I think that is because when I was working for the Maine State Park System, Orono put in a University of Maine at Orono put in a some kind of tracking device on the coast at the park there in Cape Elizabeth. And I got to talk with one of the technicians, and they told me that the receiver, the antenna that they were installing, was receiving signals from 50 miles out, which was apparently where they were thinking of putting a line of windmills. So I don't know where that whole process is. I don't know if they started. I know the fisheries are upset about it. But anyway, none of that is the solution. Windmills and solar. We need nuclear, and we need our rivers. We need to go back to hydro in Maine. Tidal and rivers are our best source of electricity, and we desperately need to start that conversation seriously. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen next year. I think it'll be teased. The issues will be teased by the right, by the Republicans, but in the end, they're going to lose because they're going to be outspent. Because Maine skews old, it skews, especially when it comes to religion, Protestantism, it skews to the freakish left, especially among the old boomers like me. I'm not the the boomers like me, skews toward the freak show, support for the freak show. And I see them spending a lot of money. I see them lying like they've never lied before. I see Maine people being gullible. I see it becoming harder and harder for Maine people to think through politics and through the news and through the media because of how powerful Facebook is and X and the 6 o'clock news still, and all of it is full of lies and deception and propaganda and manipulation, which is now driven or complemented by artificial intelligence. So we are going to get all this settled. I just don't see it happening in the short term. One of the signals to me of of hope and for the future is the fact that I'm not in prison. The only thing that's really happening to me as I began a year ago to use social media to start posts, but before that I was using a blog, and just using a blog, I managed to earn a visit from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and with the accusation that I was plotting violence against a corporation, namely Federal Express, who I was working for at the time. And I also earned a lifetime ban from working for minimum wage anywhere on earth for Federal Express. And so I knew then that I was over the target with my blog, and that was just a blog that I'm sure Google was throttling in the search. But still, I earned that sort of a reaction from the freakish left, the freakish political and religious left here in America. They said what I'm talking about actually happened in North Carolina. I was living there at the time during COVID and just after. So when Dorsey sold Twitter to Musk, and Musk made a big deal about him doing it because he supports free speech, I wanted to take him at his word. I'd never used Facebook or social media a lot before. I always realized that it was more of a psyop, more of a social engineering project than it had anything to do with being social. And I knew that when I started posting frequently on X, and I gave him the full money to get the blue check mark and all that kind of stuff. But I've never thought of it as social media. It's anti-social media, but it is media. It's a way to, it's a mechanism for getting your thinking, your beliefs, your convictions, your personality. It's a way to get it out there. So I decided to use it. So I've been using it for the past year. And Musk promised when he bought it, he's true to his word. He said, look, under my leadership, X is going to provide you with freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. And that's what I've experienced. I've been able to say what I believe about the Jews, about gays, about about anything. Although I have kind of throttled back a little bit. I mean, I'd like to speak not in the same way, but with the same sort of raw edge that Tim Bodnar speaks through his Truthslinger project. I really appreciate his edge there, his pointed, personal edge related to his convictions, political and religious convictions. I really like that about him. So I've approached that. I mean, I'm like the only person I know of in Maine who has any sort of standing based on a career in politics and religion in Maine. I'm the only one I know of who's willing to name the Jew. Just me. That's it. And so I've been doing that on X, especially in the last for 5-6 months. And the throttling, nobody sees it. I don't think anybody sees what I post, because I don't tag people and stuff or do the hashtags. I never got into any of that. So I just post, and I know that the algorithm isn't letting any of my followers, or very few of my followers, see me in their feed. And I know that they're just deleting, not allowing people to follow or something, because my follower count was rising somewhat organically until it hit 1,000, and then it slowed down to a trickle to almost nothing, and then it slowly, very slowly climbed to 1,050, like over months, and now it's down to 120, and so yeah, freedom of speech. I can speak what I believe on X, and I think that's changing now. With the evidence here in Maine is Robinson and Gagnon being able to create what may be a permanent suspension of a legitimate business account, based on Maine politics. So it's I see it coming back. This whole censorship thing that we lived through from the left under the diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology is now emerging on the right. Only on the right, it's coming from the Jews, and this idea of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust being eternal evidence of Jewish victimhood, which it never was. It didn't even happen the way that they claim it did, not in any way, shape, or form. But I won't get into that today. So I am so thankful to be able to get these ideas, this narrative off my chest. I'm going to do a lot more talking about the Christian Civic League of Maine under my leadership for 20 years, because there's no other way really for you to find it, unless I think you go to archive.org. You might be able to find some stuff there. But all the work I did for like 10 years on continuing journalism and work that started in September of 1900 under the brand called the Record. It was a newspaper when I became executive director of the Christian Civic League of Maine. It was more a newspaper, or a magazine. I guess it was a magazine, but it had been a monthly newspaper for a long time under the leadership of Ben Bubar. And then as the computer came in, and because the budget was so tiny for the Christian Civic League, and neither Jack Wyman or I was a printing press guy, we did a magazine for a while. We did some print stuff, but then as soon as email became a real thing, we started doing emails and then a website, and it was really effective. The Record was very effective. We did a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, a number of them, on John Baldacci after he went to Cuba, reasoning that he had visited with Fidel Castro. And we ended up, after I think 6 FOIA requests, getting a picture of Baldacci with Fidel Castro. That went global early. That went viral early in the life of the internet, and earned me create a lot of angst, and earned me powerful enemies in the Bangor area, which ended up stirring up a bunch of stress and tension within what used to be called the Bangor Baptist Church, because turns out at least one of the congregants there was in the picture. Apparently, he was a businessman who went with Baldacci on I guess it was a trade mission. And so we ended up, the Christian Civic League of Maine ended up, through that work, generating political unrest within the institution. And, eventually all of that honesty, all that journalism piled up and led to the funding source for the Christian Civic League, at least, the major donor side of the funding source, uh, deciding to bail on me. And I knew if I that made up a third of our budget. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to make payroll, continue making payroll, even for just the small staff I had. So I resigned. I it all of that came at a time when I couldn't be public about it because we were leaning hard into the vote about marriage. It was the first public referendum on uh, same-sex marriage in that fall, and so I resigned just before that vote. But I did it without without talking about any of this stuff. I just offered a polite, time for me to move on, kind of thing. And the vote happened, and we won. Our side won that particular vote, and it won because I managed to keep the conflict that was super intense. I managed to keep it under wraps, but there was a conflict against me that started at the very top of the so-called pro-family movement and went all the way down to the church and parish level among the pastors. That was going on for three or 4 years, leading up to that year, 2009, and it became very, very brutal and real for my leadership and for me personally and politically and professionally that year. But I was still in the press as kind of the leader of the anti-gay marriage side, and to blow it up before that public vote, even though it would have helped me, maybe, didn't make any sense politically because we needed to keep the focus where it belonged, which was getting the right vote that fall. So kind of fell on my sword politically, and then after I did that, there was no landing as I fell down the hill, so to speak, in terms of politics and people knowing who I was and power and all that kind of stuff. There was nobody put out a hand to stop me from falling. So in a career sense, I ended up becoming a driver for minimum wage in my early 50s. Couldn't continue my political career. So yeah, so this will be archived. I'm glad it's out there now. It's been enough years. I don't feel like I still need to sort of protect the institution, the Christian Civic League of Maine. Felt that way somewhat for years after I left. I mean, you don't put 20 years into something and make it. When I became leader, it had a lot of debt. When I left, it had no debt. It had money in the bank, and it also had this. We won the marriage debate, and we'd been the only effective institution pushing back against the idea of adding sexual orientation to the Human Rights Act, and so we'd done a lot of great work. The institution had done a lot of important and great work over those 20 years. That's all been erased. The record was deleted that I mentioned earlier. It was deleted by the current regime at the Christian Civic League of Maine. And I was erased by Carol Conley's regime after I left. I was erased. My memory was erased. My history was besmirched. I was accused of all kinds of things that I'd rather not ever know about, I'm sure. Mostly through gossip. It wasn't, they didn't go after me publicly. It never ended up in the courts. I might have had a slander case or something if I had paid closer attention. But I just went. I was very thankful for the opportunity that God gave me to meet all the people I met, and work with some of the absolute best men and women. Some people so much better than me, with so much more virtue and so much more courage than me. I just felt so honored, still feel so honored for those 20 years of being able to get to know a guy like Paul Medore and become friends with him, and so many others. I mean, there's so many names I could mention. Many are still alive, but many have died. Um, and and they came together under that institution, the Christian Civic League of Maine, and they worked hard, really hard. And they were always outmatched politically. Republicans did nothing during those years to help, nothing, absolutely nothing of consequence. And of course, the Democrats were the enemy. So they stood alone. The Roman Catholic diocese did nothing. They provided passive support to the other side. So they stood alone. The Christian Civic League of Maine, those dear people, those wonderful, dear, courageous, good-hearted, pursuing virtue with their whole hearts to the best of their ability in this, in the under the conditions of this social engineering that we've been living with for over a century. They wanted to do the right thing by God, with their understanding of God when it came to marriage and family formation and sexuality. They wanted the best for all Maine citizens. They really did and do. And it was just such an honor for me to have the opportunity to work with them, and then to have it end the way that it did because of money, basically. I quit over money. I just saw the writing on the wall. And then I'm so beyond thankful for my FedEx years and my driving years, driving for minimum wage, because of the internet, I was able to discover this technology, this Bluetooth technology, combined with this technology as it emerged. And while I drove and delivered packages or whatever job I had driving, whenever I had the opportunity, I would put these on. And the FedEx job was perfect because I was able to jump in and out of the truck and run to the door, and I could listen to long form content and not have to pause it every time I stopped in front of the house and ran to the door. I could go for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours listening to philosophy and theology and politics, and I learned so much during those years using the internet to learn and to grow. And God also never took away my opportunity to speak and make a difference, and that's why the FBI came to my house, and that's why a man who was my FedEx supervisor, who was on Facebook unbeknownst to the other drivers and to me, transitioning to female. He was living as a woman on Facebook, but he was pretending he was actually a man. He wasn't pretending. He was a man at FedEx. But on Facebook, he was transitioning to being a woman. I had to learn this after the fact, after I'd been fired and after the FBI had been to my house. I had to, so that the team of FedEx drivers, I was like one of their best drivers, was so but they were bemused and curious by my being thrown out without any real coherent reason. So they all started figuring it out, teasing it, looking around, and one of them found the Facebook page and brought it to me and said, "This is why you got fired." Oh, can't make this stuff up. Can't make it up. So great show this morning. Looking forward to gaining an audience. I'm thankful for Shane here, but I look forward to getting at least one more commenter, maybe even more someday, if I can punch through the no freedom of reach world called the internet these days. So I wish you the best today. Thanks for taking time to watch this on archive. If you do, thanks for being with me live. And I'll be back tomorrow morning. Pray that God will give me the energy and the heart and the focus to turn some of these into shorts and throw them up on YouTube. I also need to spend some time on my YouTube channel and clean it up and make it better, make it look better and stuff. Uh, and I don't know. I need more heart for spending time doing that kind of stuff. When I feel like I'm just going to end up like Tim, 2 years, 30,000 followers, and then overnight, all of a sudden, you're just, poof, it's all gone. All gone. So, all right, Shane, thank you, sir. And God bless you for sticking with me for an hour. And in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God be with you today.